Welcome back to the deep dive. So, for anyone trying to keep up with global events, January 3rd, 2026, that felt like a huge moment.
A watershed moment, yeah.
The news was just everywhere. This dramatic story that Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, was detained.
Right, in this coordinated U.S.-led action.
Right.
And whether you call it a complex extradition or, well, an outright kidnapping.
He was transported to face charges in New York. And for a lot of observers, people focused on rule of law, on justice, accountability. This looked like a monumental, flashy success.
Oh, absolutely. It really felt like the book was finally being closed on an authoritarian regime.
It did. But our mission today is to look past that satisfying headline.
Exactly. We've been looking at a stack of sources, articles, policy papers, strategic analyses that actually argue the exact opposite.
The opposite.
Yeah. That while this was a huge win for law enforcement, it's strategically counterproductive, especially for achieving the one thing everyone says they want.
Long-term stability, sustainable governance in Venezuela. Okay, so let's really unpack that. For this deep dive, we're setting aside the legality, the morality of it, just for a moment.
We have to.
We are focusing purely on the geopolitical outcome, the stability of the state.
And the sources suggest that by removing this central figure, however corrupt, in this very specific way.
This extraterritorial way.
Right. The U.S. might have inadvertently burned the blueprint that you need for the system to, well, to fix itself.
Burned the blueprint. I like that phrasing.
It fits. Governance. It needs mechanisms. It needs legitimacy. It needs buy-in from the people already there.
From the infrastructure.
Precisely. And when you just eliminate the central pillar of power with such, hostility, you create this political vacuum.
One that's almost impossible to fill, legitimately.
Especially not overnight. So our deep dive today, it looks at 5 specific strategic failures that come right from this detention. And we'll finish up by showing you what history tells us a successful transition actually looks like.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Failure number 1, the instant, profound legitimacy crisis.
It started the second Maduro stood up in that U.S. court. The counter-narrative was immediate. And it was devastatingly effective.
His first appearance, New York Federal Court, January 5th. He immediately asserts he was kidnapped.
And this wasn't just him saying, I'm not guilty. It was a political move.
A performance. The sources highlight that he didn't just claim wrongful arrest. He kept claiming he was the sitting Venezuelan president. And, this is critical, he demanded status as a prisoner of war.
He was performing his presidency from inside a U.S. courtroom. And that performance, for the new regime back home, was legitimacy suicide.
How so?
It instantly reframed the whole thing as a sovereignty violation. Think about that message. An American intelligence operation seizing a head of state on foreign soil.
So Maduro uses this to paint the new interim government as
a foreign-imposed puppet government, nothing more.
And what are the real consequences of that inside Venezuela? This isn't just about PR, is it?
Not at all. It makes the country ungovernable. It fundamentally obstructs the cooperation any new government needs to actually function. Imagine you're a mid-level bureaucrat or a major in the military, a police chief. Why would you risk everything to cooperate with a government that's just been publicly branded as illegitimate?
And installed by a foreign power.
Exactly. It creates this immediate systemic paralysis. No one wants to be the first one called a collaborator.
And that paralysis at home is then amplified by the international reaction.
Immediately. The criticism was intense. And it wasn't just, a few fringe actors. We saw China, Russia, and several really key Latin American countries just instantly call it an illegal military action.
So that external pressure, it just solidifies the domestic narrative. It gives the opposition within Venezuela concrete proof that their new leaders aren't really in charge.
It validates the entire sovereignty breach argument.
And this is where it really gets into what our sources call a true strategic failure. Point number 2, the hardening of resistance.
And the complete loss of any exit door for the old guard.
Explain that. What's an exit door?
Well, when you have a regime change, you need to provide incentives. You need the old system's officials, military commanders, senior police, the bureaucracy. You need them to stay cooperative.
To keep the lights on.
To keep the lights on, to maintain stability. But if the only outcome they see is extradition and a trial, you've given them zero reason to cooperate.
So the trial of Maduro in New York, it sends this very clear, very chilling signal to the entire Chavismo
The
apparatus.
signal is there is no safe harbor, no matter how much you cooperate now.
That's the concept of no exit.
That's it. The
Yeah.
message is cooperation won't save you, it'll just speed up your capture. And that, by its very nature, hardens resistance.
So instead of working with the new interim government,
They're pushed underground, towards sabotage, defection, or just vanishing with whatever resources they can grab.
okay, but I have to challenge this a little. I mean, surely removing a brutal dictator, forcing accountability, even if it causes a brief period of instability, isn't that worth it for the long-term goal of building a real democracy?
And that's the critical assumption, right? That's the politically convenient assumption.
That this is just the cost of doing justice.
But the sources argue the cost isn't just short-term instability. It's the dramatically increased likelihood of a protracted low-intensity conflict.
Because when you close all the exits,
You force your enemy to fight to the death. The source material specifically highlights this massive increase in risk that the hardline Chavismo supporters will see this not as a defeat, but as a chance for resurgence.
and just so we're clear, who are we talking about here, these hardline groups?
We're talking about the powerful and highly organized colectivos militias.
The armed civilian group.
Fiercely loyal to Maduro and Chavismo, yeah. They're decentralized but very well equipped. And then you have remnants of the ELN.
The Colombian guerrilla group.
Exactly, who have operated with, let's say, tacit support in Venezuela for years.
And these groups have no stake in any new government.
None. You can't offer them amnesty now that their supreme leader has been seized, so they will inevitably turn to guerrilla warfare. They see this chaos as their moment.
Which brings us to the third and fourth strategic failures, which are really tied together.
They are. It's about the instability of the new leadership and the vacuum of symbolism left by Maduro.
Okay, explain the symbolism part.
It's a core political science idea. Governance is always cheapest, always most stable when it runs on symbol plus existing institutions.
Like a CEO of a big company?
Perfect analogy. You
Yeah.
fire the CEO, but the board, the CFO, the department heads, they all stay. The system keeps running.
Because the symbol provides that known center of gravity, the chain of command.
Exactly. It channels compliance. But by taking Maduro, the symbol, away in such a violent, hostile manner, you don't just eliminate the man.
You shatter the whole thing. The symbol's gone, and so is the command structure he controlled.
It just thins the legitimacy of any new regime down to almost nothing. History shows us that preserving the symbol, even if you strip it of power, is what helps get cooperation. It suppresses resistance.
So let's look at who stepped into that role. Delcy Rodriguez. She was formally sworn in as interim president on January 5th.
Right as Maduro was in that courtroom.
And for anyone who doesn't follow this day-to-day, she was Maduro's staunch vice president,
Yeah.
deeply, deeply embedded in the old regime.
And that's precisely what puts her on this tightrope. It makes the whole arrangement so unstable.
She's trying to pledge loyalty to the detained Maduro,
To keep the Chavismo loyalists on her side.
while also suggesting cooperation with the U.S. to, keep the country from falling apart.
It's a profoundly weak design. It doesn't solve the legitimacy problem, it just personifies it. So now you have this huge risk of internal division.
Between the hardliners who see her as a traitor and the moderates who still see her as part of the old guard.
Right. And if that interim regime can't maintain order, if it can't even settle its own legitimacy, what's the predictable outcome for Venezuela?
Long-term intervention.
Long-term intervention and a reliance on foreign military presence. One source used the term reliance on bayonets,
On a U.S. military presence.
which of course only reinforces the narrative that the interim government is a foreign puppet. It becomes this deeply destabilizing, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Okay, so let's move to point 5. The atmosphere on the ground. This isn't just theoretical risk anymore. We have concrete evidence things got worse, instantly.
That's right. The reports we analyzed from around January 5th, they noted this immediate, alarming strengthening of controls.
Over 14 journalists were detained.
Mostly from international media. And they had their communication equipment seized.
Now, some were released quickly, but still.
Yeah.
That is not the action of a regime trying to signal a new era of openness and press freedom.
Absolutely not. It signifies continued authoritarianism, but this time it's driven by this acute legitimacy anxiety.
Not a restoration of order.
No. A government that instantly cracks down on the press is showing how insecure it is. They're so worried about the narrative, they're willing to violate basic freedoms to try and contain it. It's a rapid deterioration.
Okay, let's pivot to the historical analogy you mentioned. the one that shows a successful transition.
Right. The example of Japan after World War II, it really represents the strategic alternative to this hard removal.
And what makes it so relevant is the decision they made about the symbol.
Emperor Hirohito. Despite massive calls for his removal for a trial, General MacArthur and the Allied command preserved his position.
A highly calculated decision. Retain the symbol, but shift the ultimate authority.
It was pure strategic genius. By preserving the emperor and then using his unquestioned authority to communicate the end of the war.
The Gyoko and Shush. The broadcast on August 15th, 1945.
Yes. That single act kept the entire chain of command intact. It smoothed disarmament and encouraged compliance from millions of soldiers and a vast bureaucracy, and it just massively lowered the cost of occupation for the Allies.
You got a complete systemic overhaul, but without the chaos.
Exactly. So if you contrast that with Venezuela now, the difference is it's stark.
If the Allies had kidnapped and tried the emperor, that would have been the equivalent of the Maduro detention.
Absolutely. That action would have instantly delegitimized the entire occupation. It would have split the armed forces, hardened resistance. The cost of governing Japan would have skyrocketed.
And the Venezuelan detention has basically done that. It split the command structure and hardened the resistance all at once.
At the exact same time.
So what does this all mean for you, for the listener, trying to track this situation? The core takeaway seems to be that the detention, while a success for, say, retributive justice,
And a very flashy move for law enforcement.
it has strategically destroyed the necessary governance blueprint.
It has. Venezuela was already fragile. This action is likely to set the stage for long-term destabilization. It just increases the probability of turning a difficult political crisis into a deep, bloody quagmire.
So if the U.S. objective was really strategic-like, securing oil, controlling narcotics, what was the alternative? What did the sources say would have been lower risk?
They suggested a Sun Tzu approach. Focus on controlling the environment, not just seizing the target.
Oh, geez.
It means symbol preservation and offering a clear, achievable exit to the regime. That might have meant a negotiated agreement where Maduro steps down, maybe stays in Venezuela under some kind of strict observation.
I understand the strategic logic there, but politically, that seems impossible for any U.S. administration to justify.
Well, that's the tension, right? That's the conflict at the heart of the problem. Political accountability versus pragmatic governance.
But strategically.
Strategically, that Sun Tzu approach would have kept the chain of command together, allowed for a much smoother transition, and presented a much lower risk than the chaos and fracturing we're seeing now.
And that distinction between the short-term win of accountability and the long-term failure of stability, that seems to be the lens you have to use to understand what's happening in Venezuela now.
It is. The initial phase is critical, but the risk of this escalating into something deeper, something much more prolonged, it's tragically realistic.
So the crucial variable for you to watch next, it's the degree of indirect, sustained support from China and Russia.
That's the key. If that external backing money, weapons, diplomatic cover, if that starts flowing to the hardline underground elements now fighting the interim regime, this instability won't be a short-term problem.
That could transform into a persistent long-term regional conflict.
And that is the crucial geopolitical fallout that builds directly on the foundations of this one strategic failure.